This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, I ask Aaron about asking.
Woo! Everything's gonna be alright. Rockabye. This is what a Joey sounds like.
Wow.
I know it's not. It's a terrible thing to open a podcast with, to hear that. That was actually
I liked it.
No, yeah, thank you. And Joey would have liked it if he was here. He would have. Ha! Damn it, Joey. That's what happens when you're not here. This is actually what an Aaron sounds like. And this is what executive producer and rockabye enthusiast Jess Vander sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. Rockabye, baby.
Woo! Welcome to Critical Nonsense. We've never, ever started an episode with welcome to Critical Nonsense.
Shocking. Would it be like, welcome, Critical Nonsense, welcome?
Right.
Welcome.
Critical.
Is this sort of is it a place? Is it a state of mind?
It is, you know what? It's a feeling in your heart. And it's not a myocardial infarction. It is specifically just that warm, fuzzy feeling, that good feeling. Okay, we got to ask the question. Any housekeeping, cleaning things? No.
Come on, what do you think?
No, I know. Rate, review, subscribe. That's all we got. But do it. Listen, and click buttons. It helps us. It helps us get more listeners. Always the silly old person voice. So, Jess, I know we can hop right into it because,
of course,
right before we hopped on the mics, you mentioned that you had a thought, you had a rumination, and I would love to hear it and toss it back and forth like a mental football or basketball or a ball that I can actually catch.
Yeah, maybe something on the ground.
Yeah.
Just rolling it.
Golf. Yeah, let's just roll it. It'll be like a dodgeball that is not used for dodgeball that you just like underhanded.
You just skip around.
Yes.
Hey, we promise nonsense and we deliver nonsense.
Indeed we do.
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited to be asking you specifically about this, Aaron, because in some ways, it's sort of a thing that I feel like you have brought up before, but not quite so directly. We had a conversation, I think it was last year, about ask culture and what it is to create an instinct where you desire to ask questions. And it was in the contrast to guess culture and people who just assume things. And it took us down a different rabbit hole. But I bring this up because I want to talk more about asking. I feel like I'm approaching a sudden sort of, overwhelming moment in my life that I cannot explain why, where I am suddenly consumed by this like existential need to be asking more and answering less. And part of this stems from a place where I feel like I'm really bad at asking. And maybe an asking insecurity. And I have been trying to do this personal exploration and was doing a little bit of reading. And just yesterday came across an interesting article talking about the power of questions. This is a Harvard Business Review article from 2018. The first half of which is just talking about how effective questions are, both at getting information and learning stuff, but also getting people to like you and creating better connections with people. It references that almost legendary study that was done and published by the New York Times of, the 36 questions to make anyone fall in love, if you remember that, where questions get progressively more intimate. But it was really interesting because this article dives into how different questions can do different things for you. For example, it talks about how the types of questions you might ask as a lawyer or a doctor or a journalist, you want, the types of good questions are ones where you say, the only possible answers are yes or no, so you don't get any evasive answers, or you start with pessimistic outcomes to get people not to lie to you. Whereas, if you're trying to form relationships with people and have a more cooperative conversation, the types of questions you might ask are, much more anchored in follow-up questions. As opposed to starting some totally new topic, you build on something that you had, and you also progressively build up to the intimacy of the type of thing that you ask. Whereas, some other more investigative or interrogative conversation would start with the hardest question first, and then lighten up from there as you sort of broken that ice. And it just took me on this whole, tailspin, whirlwind, mental spinning moment of how nuanced the art of asking questions really is. And I think that as a person who is theoretically in a career where you're supposed to be incredibly good at asking questions, and knowing that this is something that is personal to you and is part of sort of a culture that you aspire to, of being in this ask culture, I really want to know your point of view, Aaron. How do you ask good questions?
Oh my God. I didn't know that there was a question in this podcast that was going to see me so much as the one that you just asked, but I feel very, very seen. Well, so I do have a lot of opinions about question asking, and as you were sort of going through the context setting, I think a lot of it does have to do with growing up in an ask culture, which was all about figuring out when and how to use questions to either perform a certain way for individuals, to learn something about a situation or individual, which was honestly like oftentimes the least often used, and then to like direct a situation, like using questions to like put stakes in the round to like bumper people. And this is why like I think that questions are like powerful, period, and can be used for nefarious aims as well as positive ones. But I'll draw on like, for me, I think a lot about, and I've thought a lot about questions, not just in the context of like how I grew up, but also specifically in the context of research, because the exercise of going into moderating a consumer group or doing an ethnography with somebody, for me, it's really intense, and it was always really revelatory, because I only have an hour or 90 minutes with these people, and most likely I'm going to get anywhere between like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of their thoughts, all the way up to like the full 90 if it's like a one-on-one. But then also they're representing so many other people that can't be in the room. That's like, by the nature of research, especially qual, right. It's a small group. So I have a few principles that I do follow that have spilled over into the rest of my life, for better or for worse. One of them that I always talk about is 25-cent questions, and thinking about the moments when I'm trying to ask a question that is intended to invite the respondent to say as much as possible. Like, what I'm trying to do is say this, like the smallest spark to create the largest fire. And when it comes to like work and research, it's really important and effective to make the most of that limited amount of time. But in life, I get really excited when I meet a new person and I can figure out, or I'm processing in my head, what's a 25-cent question versus a 5-cent question, by the way, that is going to like
5-cent question being like something superficial or yes or no, or
5-cent question is like, how, why, like, when, why did you do that? Like, it's these like little trickle questions that like naturally, like in day-to-day life, we like throw around really quickly because we're not really trying to learn. We're trying to gather information to like figure out where our GPS is telling us to turn next, or our friend is telling us how to get to the next move in our D&D game. But like the 25, because I've played so much D&D that I could describe it that way. But a 25-cent question is, tell me how you got from where you were last week to where you are today. Like, by the very structure and nature of that question, somebody is going to have to tell a lot, is going to have to fill in a lot of gaps, and you ignite this sort of like divulgent storytelling mode that people always have. And so you get so much more out of that. And I find it so useful because, like, one, you learn a lot more about somebody really, really quickly. Two, I find that it makes me feel like I have to work less and I can listen more, because I feel like I'm not just like trying to like play tennis with questions of like, okay, what's the next question? Oh, that's the question. And it's so good for meeting new people, because then if I'm like at a barbecue, I'm not like, like, oh God, what's the next thing that I'm supposed to say? And then the third reason is that it allows people, it does spark a natural instinct that I think a lot of people have to soliloquy about themselves. Like, it allows them to like take a conversation where they feel comfortable taking it, and you don't have to do that mental work of like, where does somebody feel comfortable? So I know that that's like a long-winded 1 of 3, and I nested a 3 inside a 3 with my answer to your question. But like, these 25-cent questions is like a really big principle. And to be honest, what I've also found is that in my personal close relationships with people that I've known forever, it's really, really powerful to make sure that I learn something new about them that I might think that I already know. And it also, like, if I'm like helping them out, or I'm just like being a helpful ear, it gives a little bit more room for them to spill and to be vulnerable and to be wherever they need to be and not feel interrogated. Because that's the other issue with like 5-cent questions. They require 5-cent answers, which then means you need more 5-cent questions. And it becomes this like really intense, like what, why, where, when, who, as opposed to, tell me about your decision-making process. How did you decide that you wanted to like leave your job? How did you decide that you wanted to move in with her after you've been dating for a long time? Like, they're different types of questions.
Yeah, it almost sounds like what you're saying is they're even beyond the questions themselves is like the tempo of question asking, and that in some ways what you want to be able to do is ask a question that encourages longer answers in a way. Yes. Like if it's a short question that elicits a short answer, it doesn't sound like you really want the depth. And maybe that cuts the question short itself. Like, that's a silly thing to say. It's just it means that you're not really asking. It's like there's a way to superficially ask for something that's like a quick beat, and you're like, okay, well, like little batting back and forth, versus deep, indulgent questions that are like deep breaths. It's like, I really want to know. And so that's why this question is going to be packed with like a low and slow simmer of a response expectation.
Yes. Like, a question is a recipe. Like, every question that we ask is going to invite the use of like 1 or 2 ingredients, or is going to invite a cookbook. And I love to ask questions that invite a cookbook, or that like give people the room to like go there when the time is right.
And so this is the part though that I like, knowing that that is an objective and genuinely wanting that. I think that there is a struggle that I have that also this article kind of tees up too, where it describes, once you've sort of broken the ice and you're like in a conversation, there are 2 types of deeper questions: a full switch question, which like changes the topic, or a follow-up question designed to like get more out of what was just said. And I think that regardless of whether you're like trying to pivot and you're trying to explore a whole new set of cookbook information, or someone has mentioned something and you want to go deeper, it doesn't fully crack the challenge of how do you come up with a good one on the spot, because it's way easier to just say, tell me more about that. Or, that's interesting. Explain yourself. When like it's easier to come up with an ingredient in the moment versus how am I going to pivot this to something bigger and deeper? Or how am I going to follow up in a way that really pulls more out of someone?
Well, and what I love about this is that there is it's so little is about the question and so much more is about the motivation of the question asker. Because I think that, and I think it's really powerful to go into different question moments with a specific mindset. Like in my mind, if you have the mindset of curiosity and that is your core thing, it doesn't matter whether the questions move one way or another, because whether you're like doing a full stop question or you're doing a deeper dive question, because you're naturally going to be trying to learn as much from this as possible. Mm-hmm. And those moments of question asking, that mindset that fuels those questions is very different than like the performance question asking. And I find this bucket kind of, it's an interesting one. I think that some people get irritated when it seems like someone is asking a question to which they think they already know the answer. And it's like, why the fuck are you asking me that question?
Is
like
hypothesis testing? It's like,
yeah.
Is it this?
Yeah. It's like, and it is obnoxious, but I find that most people that are doing that is because they're trying to do a few things. They're trying to like push down their own biases and their own hypotheses to literally make room for something else to possibly be true. They are also trying to understand how someone else's mind works, because they're really trying to see, how do I collaborate with this person? Like where does their brain zigzag so that I can line up my zong-zing? There's not an opposite of zigzag, I don't think, right? Like to that. Like how do I find a way to find the moments of intersection between us? So there's like a meta like analysis being done. And then I think there's also like the I think less charitable moments and the more nefarious moments are the ones where like people are laying traps, where it's like, and that may or may not fall into like the attorney camp of like, I'm asking a question that there is a right or wrong answer here. And like I need to know whether or not you know the right or wrong answer, and you have succeeded or failed. And those questions exist, but are very passive aggressive at times, unless you are an attorney and trying to get a yes, no to.
Right. It has its use case. You know, this is going to sound so crazy, but like maybe part of the challenge is that it's sort of a question of whether your default is to ask questions that are kind of secretly answering.
Right.
To my mind, when you say performance question asking, it's kind of to that same end of like, I kind of have an answer. Yep. So I'm mostly just asking a question so that I can get like confirm myself, or like I'm doing the heavy lifting here, versus a question rooted in a genuine opportunity to let someone tell you.
Yes.
Like not that you have to know something or that you have to be testing something. It's like, what about this thing?
Yeah. I mean, humility is really, really hard. Humility I don't think is hard. I think depending on your personality and your profession, humility is not as rewarded as confidence. And like whether it's veiled or, you know, like or performative confidence or actual confidence tends to be rewarded more so than this like, I don't know, and I'm out here trying to like learn. And I am deeply in the camp of the latter. Like I do not know the answers. Like my intention is to use my skill of being able to connect the dots and to like amalgamate complex information to make a very strong, like a well-reasoned recommendation. Mm-hmm. But like, and I don't know if, I mean, you and I have definitely talked about this because every consultant team talks about this, is like, you are going to be sitting down with the CEOs and CMOs and leaders of industries that have been working in those industries as they've evolved over 30 years, as they've evolved over 30 or 40 or 50 years. And like the presumption that we would know as much of them as them is the wrong presumption. Nobody assumes that. And anyone who does assume that is hiring a partner for the wrong reason.
Or that's the thing is like, I think it's actually pretty easy to, in a role that is advisory, consulting, or, being an expert of any kind makes it feel like it is your responsibility to know the answers. And that is like, maybe the cliche takeaway of every like business article, but like instead, like, what if you don't know? Like, what if you don't know? And maybe they know, and maybe you know a few things, but also they know a few things, and worry less about the things you know because you'll get around to it. Like, what about the things that you don't?
Man, and like, there is no situation in which someone, maybe absolutes are never smart, but I can't think of a situation that's more accurate in which someone asking a question didn't give them more information that was clearer or like provided more information than was before. Like, I mean, please, listeners, email us at criticalnonsense@sylvain.co.com. Sylvain.com?
Co.
Email us there because I know our email address. And tell me how wrong I am on that. But I think that there are, even in moments when people are using questions to, like, I'm going back to your thought about like questions to which you know the answer and you're using the question to do that. There's also like using questions to, in place of a statement. So you could use statements to build empathy. You could say, I like Lego, and hope that someone's going to say, oh, me too. Or you can say, does anybody know what recent Lego set was released? To someone that you know also likes Lego. Like, you use this information, and yes, I'm doing it right. Lego is not pluralized. That is plural by itself. Everybody should know that. But like,
everybody needs to know.
Using questions to create connection and using questions to generate empathy and alignment, I think is really, really powerful and important, because there is, I think this goes back to the extreme side of that confidence and competence that tends to be rewarded, is this like arrogance and this, it doesn't matter. I know everything that can be known about this thing, and that's why I am asking my questions or positing my recommendation or like putting forth my hypotheses. I think that is awful, right? Like, there's so many situational considerations that need to be taken on board to figuring out what the right path forward is. There are so many nuances to how one company in a certain category operates than another. And it goes down to people. Like, we are all so incredibly different that, like, yeah, that person might remind you of somebody that you've hung out with. And if you ask them questions that you would that person, maybe you'll end up in the same spot. But like, maybe there's like the reality that they're a totally different person, and there's other things about them that you might want to know, and that you need to like open yourself up to that.
Yeah. And maybe I'll play a little devil's advocate also, mostly for my own sake, because I think this is something that I do, like, I struggle with this, that I feel like it is easier to be confident and assert the things you know than ask those good questions. And instead, I think a trap that I tend to fall into is I'll throw out bids, like the one that you gave of the Lego example of like, I like Legos and hope that does something. Or like, here's a thought, like, does that spark something for you, is sort of the implicit question, because of how hard it is to come up with a question. And maybe that's the thing, is that as much as it seems like, put down your ego and embrace curiosity, thoughtful, like interrogative curiosity is not necessarily super easy either. So like, what do you do when you're just coming up empty? You're so like, true. I do want to know, but I don't know you. Like, what do I ask?
This is so true. By the way, I empathize so deeply with like where you are in this conversation. By the way, I feel like every question I'm coming back with oh yeah, here's the answer, and I'm doing exactly what you're describing, kind of.
No, I'm asking.
Right?
that's the problem.
Which is so funny, but I'm calling myself out, actually, like, where it's because I'm really passionate about this and because I think about it a lot. I have a lot of thoughts about it. But and I want to like signpost that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
I think that there is I find that this is accelerated. I find that time is just an interesting. I go back to the research example. Like when you start to condense the amount of time in which you have the opportunity to be interrogative or to direct or to perform or whatever it is, I find that the need to mentally move very quickly through what questions you want to ask and why, I find that to be extremely exhausting. Because
yes.
I like the idea that I think there's two things. One is that constant question of, did I ask the right question? Like, and mine is, was that a dumb question? Did I ask a really, really dumb question? That's one. The second is I'll ask it and be like, was that a really ineffective question? Like, did I just ask a 19-cent question instead of a 25-cent question? Did I just like, you know, convolute a question together? And there's another thing that I found a lot of like solace in this when it came to like research training that also helped me in life, which was like I had a habit of asking compound questions, meaning I would ask 4 questions back to back to back and then be like, okay, so just answer that. And in my head, I'm asking additional questions because I'm trying to like clarify my question.
Right. You're getting closer to the core of the question by submitting 4 questions.
Exactly. And then the recipient of that, of course, is thinking, which of those 4 questions am I supposed to answer? I don't know. So I'm going to formulate a question in my head based on that information and answer that question that I think was asked. And it's like, well, this was a waste of all of our time because I didn't ask a good question and you couldn't answer the question that I wanted. And so the solution that I found was always ask one question and let other people tell you if they don't understand or for clarification or whatever. And it really goes back to that root of that like, I don't know, that like tightrope walk between confidence and humility, where it's like, I don't know if this question is going to land. I'm going to let them answer the question that I asked and or tell me, could you rephrase that because I don't know what the hell you just asked me? And shockingly, I think the side benefit is that you realize that you're not as confusing as you might think. Because just by making it one question, you've made things a lot easier for everybody else. And most people will tell you if they need it clarified. But usually that step kind of does it on its own.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like it adds on to like it adds to that thing you were saying earlier about like also whether or not the question fully landed. Did you get a sense that their motivation was genuine and you're just trying your best to give them a good answer? You're like, maybe it wasn't the clearest question, but I want to do this right. Like I want to have a positive, low and slow cookbook Q&A exchange.
Yes. I mean, a question for you that I have, and this is a little bit of an answer question, is like, I tend to signpost a lot. I try to verbally signpost. So, and this is also a thing, I guess, from qualitative research, is like, I will say at the beginning of a session, I might ask the same question, what sounds like 3 different times. It's not because you're answering incorrectly, or it's literally because I'm trying to clarify or understand. And there are little micro moments of signposting where I'll say like, this might be a really confusing question, and I'm still formulating this in my head, or I'm letting you know I don't know all the answers to this, and this might be something that's like very deep knowledge, so grant me a little bit of grace. I'm in fact-finding mode. And then I'll ask my questions. I do think that there's a danger of deference in that, but I also find that signposting frees me from a lot of the internal torture of asking a question.
Yeah.
And so my actual question in here is like, do you signpost ever? Do you find that does it have that same benefit for you when you're trying to like figure out the right question for the moment? Or is that like, that's just too much going on to like meta yourself?
Yeah. I think that the closest thing that I might do is more like uh be transparent or say out loud the the thing that I wish, like, I wish that we had a question now, or like,
right.
this sounds so crazy, but like, I feel like I will acknowledge or I will stall for time if I'm still trying to figure, if I'm still formulating, I might not say it as directly as possible, and more acknowledge like, there's probably probably something there, and I'm sure there's a way to be more direct, like you're describing, when you're really reaching for it. But that's the worst of it, is like the vulnerability of fully internalizing, wow, I don't have a clear question to ask, or I don't really know what to say. And that pressure, I mean, that's the thing that comes down to me, is less about the signaling and more of that like internal battle of, oh boy, I'm at a loss. This is so embarrassing. Sounds like I wasn't listening, but I was listening, and I just don't have anything to say right now. Or I'm trying to come up with a curious follow-up, and and here I am spinning.
The silence monster is eating the room, and I need to battle it by saying anything. I'm very, very familiar with that.
Or it's like, you do it.
Yeah.
Turn now. There's like definitely a little bit of what I suspect to be like a youngest child syndrome of this as well, where I just assume someone else will have a thought or have a question to keep that momentum going.
Yeah.
And realizing that actually it does depend on me to have the question is, it's more pressure than it is a freeing thing to say out loud, I admit.
It so is. I mean, there's a couple things that I also do, and I don't know that I do them some of them I do consciously, because it's like years of also trying to battle silence monsters and whatnot. Also youngest child, so also identify.
Also same.
Right. So one of them that I've found really helpful is playback. So like, sometimes someone answers a question and I literally just need to say, so what I'm hearing is this, this, and this, because that's basically what my brain is doing anyway. And what it helps me do is literally slow down and dissect out loud. It also in and of itself is a question of like, did I hear that right? And so like, because we're human beings, like none of us are ever going to be as good as like an Aaron Sorkin script, right? Like in the moment. So it gives other people a chance to be like, oh, that is not what I meant, but that is what I said. What I meant was this part of it. And that actually just like allows some time for the mental formulation that's going on to be out loud. The second thing, which was a big one that I found, is, I don't know where this is taking me, but this is where my mind is going. And then I literally slow down and I narrate the ping pong that's happening. And admittedly, some people are deeply into it because it allows them room to actually find the thing that they want to hold on to be like, ooh, that's the thing. Which is helpful. For other people, it's too much because there's too much ping pong.
You're so right. I think this is a type of signposting that our dear Joey does, which is, what's interesting about that is blank, or what that makes me think of is blank, which is not the same. Right. But it gives you that, it's closer to what we were saying earlier about the full switch question, where it's like, it allows you to continue the conversation, but you pivot it to a different place because maybe you've hit a dead end or you've run out of questions yourself. It doesn't mean there's not more to talk about, but maybe you've run out on this particular train of thought and you're shifting tracks and you're like, maybe there's something over here. And if I say it out loud, maybe we'll go someplace else.
And with the blank stares that might still come at the end of that, it does... For me, it slows down the ping pong in my brain to be able to then land that, like, what is making me think about this is this. So my question is this. Yeah. Like, and I find that, in social situations, I find that like people just, it's not as structured. So like people will ping pong back. But I find in research or in advising clients and talking through actual problems, there's enough room for them to either like kind of give me a baru face or enough room for them to be like, oh shit, that was the piece that I couldn't grab it. I couldn't hold that long enough to be able to deal with it. And so like, just, it's like writing, it's talking out loud. It's all moving at a slower pace than the speed at which everything is being processed.
Yep.
And it also just, it moves some of the other content out of the way. Because I think that anybody who is deeply curious knows the torture of how like every piece of stimulus is just, it blows up your brain and you can run down like 80 different hallways. Yeah. And there's that question of like, oh shit, like I need to pick one right now in this moment. And I don't want to look stupid. And I want to be useful and all that. But I do find that like, I mean, we've hit a lot of really practical things in this conversation. I
think we have. I agree.
I know the rain and the hail and the sleet are coming down over here. I think I need a weighted blanket for this wrap-up corner.
Oh,
that was so bad. Oh, I hate myself for that one.
It was great. It was great. It sort of painted this mental picture and sort of bundled you up before bam.
Yes.
Hit it with the transition. My hope was that in this conversation about question asking, we would pose more questions than we answer. And I do think we got there. I think in this winding journey, you know, talking about both the sort of the heft of questions, asking the 25-cent versus the 5-cent, but also thinking about the tempo of questions and giving yourself chances to slow down the cooking time.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about, you know, how to prioritize or even challenge yourself to prioritize curiosity over confidence, even when it's way harder to do it that way than the other way around. And giving yourself chances to signpost and signal when, frankly, you haven't come to the right question, but you're trying there and proving that you have good intentions and your motivation for asking is one of openness and a desire to know. I think the objective has been reached of searching for good ways to ask questions. We've touched on some, and there are, I'm certain, so many more that we did not discuss. If you all have other thoughts, you know where to send us a note. It's criticalnonsense@sylvain.co. And, you know, tell us your tips. Tell us your tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how to do this better, because it is so hard.
And it's not just for Jess, it's for me too. Thanks.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by the sound of questions everywhere.
I would like to take this opportunity, as is my right every time somebody's missing, to thank you, Aaron Powers, and Mr. Joey K. Meyer for being the greatest co-host of all time.
Yo, it's not possible when you've got the co-host of Jess Vander and executive producer. Like, you have to be really, really clear that you wear all these hats and you wear them with such, not peaches, not apples, no, a plum. That's what you do, and we appreciate it ever so deeply all the time. Thanks, Jess.
Special thanks to... You're actually doing this one.
Oh, I am doing this one. I want to thank... oh, man. I'm always bad at this. I want to thank sound engineer, Jim Carrey enthusiast, and maybe the next Riddler in the next Batman, Alex Contel.
Thank you to programming coordinator and always playing back the tracks. What's switching it up? It's Les Jacobs.
We also want to thank that curious cadre of Nora Mestrich and Sarah Gilbert. Thank you both for your production help, friends.
And as always, thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Special thanks.
Special thanks. I want to thank this YouTuber, Ryan Hall, who has raised all of my questions about weather YouTube and like, yeah, just like deep people who you would think were talking about, I don't know, like gaming or celebrity gossip, but it's actually just about the weather and like their rig and their setup and everything that they follow, and the merch is like a thing. So like,
what?
Yeah, I'm shouting him out. He is on our TV quite a bit this week with all these shenanigans that we're experiencing in the week that we're recording this.
Oh boy, extreme weather.
Yar.
Very curious. That's cool. I would like to thank, those people who are really good at asking questions, because when I don't have anything and I come up empty, it's really useful to have y'all around. So thanks.
I think you're thanking ramblers. I think that's actually the people that have a very, very open mesh fence between what's in their brains and what spills out of their mouths. And I'm happy to receive that. Thank you. And I want to thank the Ask culture communities of the world. Like, I know I keep on bringing it up and like this sort of like divide, but I think that the safe space that is created by assuming that you don't know everything makes coming from a curiosity stance very, very easy. And so I'm thankful that there have been communities, however frustrating I find them now, that espouse and believe in this sort of this asky guessy quandary. I guess I think the ask culture, and I should thank the guess culture, but
Just
I think culture. I'm inspiring.
I'd like to thank the Better Homes and Gardens new junior cookbook, which is a kids cookbook from I think like the late 90s, with the most unusual and memorable sort of artistic styling with these massive like face bodies. It's like just the head. It's just face, and they're always cooking stuff. And for all of that low and slow cooking, cogitating, coagulating, questionating.
I love coagulated question cogitation. That sounds right.
Yes.
That's what cooking. Can I just throw another one, and maybe it's the last one in there too. America's Test Kitchen, man.
My word.
Oh, best cooking subscription.
A renewed love.
Obsessed.
Yeah, tell us the top 3 things we need to know about why everyone needs to subscribe to America's Test Kitchen right now.
Number 1, the timing estimates are accurate from the moment you get your butt off the couch to when you're putting a spoon in your mouth. Awesome. Love it. Makes it easy to plan. 2, the actual tips and techniques for how you are going to cook, really, really practical and usable. Small things like always peel ginger with a spoon instead of a knife so that you have plenty of ginger left over. Or how to remove skin from, or deshell an egg, hard-boiled egg, in a really, really effective way. Surprise, I think it's adding salt and baking soda to your water while you boil it. Makes it much easier. Don't take my word for it. Just know that there's going to be a little icon in any recipe that you want that's going to use it. 3, the actual videos, like the technique videos that they produce for Cooks Illustrated, ATK, and all the others, they are like in this perfect quasi place of like corny as all hell and like kind of fun and quirky, and it's just delightful that you get to learn something in 20 minutes about why Dutch ovens really are the best cooking instrument of all time. So that's 3 very specific reasons. I strongly, strongly love this, and I recommend it to everybody because the past 6 months have been the most delicious of my recent memory.
Wow, America's Test Kitchen, you've got an ambassador.
You do.
Reach out to us.
Hit me
for
up.
deals.
Immediately.
We're not shy about it.
Not at all. Not at all. This has been lovely.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Jess. Bye.
Okay. See you later.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
No. Who are you?
I don't know.
No, you're going to be you.
I'm going to be me.
You're going to be you.
That's smart.